making sure that we feel balanced and satisfied with where we're at in life or where we want to be. And if we're missing, like if something doesn't feel complete or we feel that there's levels or areas in our life that need a little bit more attention, we focus on those.
Welcome to A Sister's Love, the podcast that helps women who are healing by having those deep conversations, giving practical advice and words of encouragement. Come on, let's talk about it.
Hello, my beautiful sisters. Welcome back to another episode of A Sister's Love Podcast. On today's episode of A Sister's Love Podcast, we have a guest. Her name is Tamara Fox, and she is a survivor of sexual assault, a survivor of emotional abusive parent, a father that was on opioids, and she experienced so many deaths in a span of 2 years. And now she is on her journey of healing, and she's here to help talk to you about how she shifted from traditional therapy to life coaching and how it transformed her life and the things that she did that can help you transform your life. But before we dive into her story, let me introduce myself. Hi, I'm your coach, Rose Jones, and I'm your host here at A Sister's Love Podcast. And I am just one woman with one voice, with one story, trying to help other people tell theirs about their traumatic experience. So if you are a woman who had experienced trauma or who are on a journey to self-love or self-healing, and you are looking for a community, looking for support and looking for resources, then you are in the right place. I would love for you to become a weekly listener. All you have to do is hit the subscribe button, turn on your notifications so that you never miss another episode of A Sister's Love Podcast. Today we have Tamara, and she's going to come on today and tell us a little about her story, though, how she experienced trauma and the things that she did to move forward and how she got back to loving herself. So I'm going to hand it over to Tamara and let her tell us a little bit about her story.
Awesome. Thank you, Rose. And hello to your audience. Nice to meet everyone. As Rose mentioned, my name is Tamara Fox, and I'm a certified health and wellness coach. And I actually got into coaching after years of trauma and after experiencing therapy and realizing that therapy wasn't really the thing that helped me heal. It was coaching and looking at myself on this holistic level that really helped me heal when I paid attention to more than just my mind. So that's how I got into coaching. And a little bit more about me: when I was 19 years old, so in 2011, I woke up to a masked man standing over my bed with a gun in my apartment when I was asleep in the middle of the night. And he proceeded to ask me where my safe was. Well, I was 19 and didn't have a safe. I worked in a restaurant, didn't have any money. So he had the wrong apartment. And after negotiating with him for some time, trying to get him to leave, he did not leave and ended up raping me and physically assaulting me. He dislocated my arm and beat me up pretty poorly before he left my apartment. So that was what I always say is like the first event that happened to me as far as trauma goes, kind of like the catapult. And then after that as well, my dad had struggled with opioids for years. He was an opioid addict, and it got pretty severe when I was around 19, 20, 21. So right after my trauma, and he became pretty verbally abusive and was dealing with a lot of mental health issues as well, which I experienced or had a lot of repercussions from just from him being my dad and dealing with my own mental health while he was dealing with his. And then from 2016 to 2022, I experienced 7 deaths in 6 years, one of which was my father. He passed in 2020. So right at the height of COVID, April 4th, 2020, when COVID had kicked off. And then last year in 2022, I lost one of my brothers and one of my best friends in less than a 5-month time span. So I always say my trauma, again, started when I was 19 with that big life event where it was my definite near-death experience, saw my life flash before my eyes, did not think I was going to live. But then after that, from 2016 to 2022, just continuing to have quite a bit of trauma that occurred. But as I mentioned, the coaching, I'm not only doing my own coaching, I am a coach, but the coaching that I get from the coach I work with has really helped me to heal in a different way than trauma did, or than therapy did.
Can you explain to them like the difference type of change that you got from therapy, like what therapy you did, like traditional talking therapy where you'll call in and they'll just talk to you about your day. You're like, oh, how you feeling today? What have you did to get out the bed and stuff like that? Like what did they do in therapy and what did you do with your coach that you have right now that shifted, that made you have that shift?
Yeah. So I feel like I tried everything when it comes to therapy. I did EMDR, so eye movement desensitization. I've done somatic therapy. I feel like I've done almost every therapy there was. It was a lot of talk therapy. So shortly after my trauma in 2011, it was talk therapy. I was in there at least once, I think if not 2 to 3 times a week, meeting with my therapist in person. Again, this was 12 years ago, so quite some time ago, talking about what triggers was I having, what emotions was I experiencing. At the time, I wasn't really sleeping because the event happened in the middle of the night, so I was afraid to sleep. So just talking about overall how I was feeling and trying to cope and deal with what had happened was really what the focus of therapy was throughout the years. And I did therapy for years on and off. I tried different therapists because I was always like, this feels so cold. Like, it doesn't feel like they're relating to me. I felt alone. I felt like the therapist just didn't really understand. And I know they did, but they couldn't relate. And if they could relate, they couldn't tell me that because therapists aren't allowed to say, I get it. Here's what I've experienced. Here's what I've been through. So the therapy just felt cold and disconnected. I kept trying it. And then finally I did encounter coaching or learn more about coaching, and coaching was more forward focused. So after I felt like I had truly healed, and I think there's a time and place for therapy. I definitely needed therapy in a lot of ways to de-escalate the emotions around the traumatic events that had happened and process through some of the trauma that had happened. But once I shifted into coaching and started doing coaching and working with a coach on my own, it really got me focused on the future, focused on my goals, not as much stewing in what had happened, but who could I become and what did I want to be? And how could I still get there regardless of what had happened to me in the past? And that's where the coaching was more future focused and not as much past focused.
Yeah, I agree with that because when I did therapy, when you said, I kind of relate. I was raped as a young person too. My father was on drugs since I was little, and I watched him beat my mom. So, like my trauma was compound, just like yours, trauma over trauma over trauma. Trauma's like it's like every instant I look around, something else bad was happening to me or happened around me, and it's like I felt like it was like combined trauma. And when I did therapy, we did CBD. Oh my God. I think it's CBT or CB. I can't think of the name of it. Therapy. And it was more about, like you said, managing your emotions. That was good for the moment because it let me live outside of that event, but I wasn't able to move forward. I wasn't able to move forward. And when I started to, I do the coaching too. So when I started to move forward and do my coaching and my accountability coaching and my awareness coaching and my reflection coaching, and I'm like, I'm moving forward and I'm not so worried about the past. So I totally agree. Like a combine of therapy and coaching together is very powerful because it helps you, and the therapy help you with the past, and like coaching helps you move forward. So I totally agree with that aspect of understanding what aspect of therapy and what aspect coaching you need in what period of your life, and to help you move forward in your healing journey.
Yeah. I feel that people too often outgrow therapy. Like or it becomes a crutch. Like if you're in therapy for too long, it's because you're not able to cope on your own and you're relying on your therapy. Like I've encountered people that are like, oh, I need to talk to my therapist about this. And like, that's great. But how are you going to function without your therapy? Like the goal isn't for you to have to rely on anyone else. The goal is for you to be able to rely on yourself to be everything you need to, or to do everything you need to do. And of course, firmly believe we need to talk to people and get stuff off of our chest. But sometimes I've met people and encountered people that come pretty dependent on their therapists and like treat it like a crutch. And so I'm a believer that we do outgrow therapy at some point, which I experienced. Whereas I don't think we can ever outgrow coaching. You may outgrow your coach and need a different coach for a different purpose. Like some people, I've worked with people who work with me as a coach, and then they shift. They want to work with somebody who's maybe more focused on business to help them build their business and be more of a business coach. They don't need as much of a personal coach, which is fine and great. But I don't think coaching is something that we necessarily outgrow because, as you shared and I shared, it's about focusing on the future, setting goals, achieving those goals, somebody holding you accountable, somebody calling you out too, like saying, hey, you told me you're going to do this by this week and you haven't done it. Help me understand why. And there's not that, you get assignments and homework or whatever every coach calls it different terminology. Whereas in therapy, it's more about, like we've talked about, it's just being okay with what occurred instead of focusing on what can be.
Yeah. I call those things action towards love.
I like that.
Yeah. So that's when I get up and I get demotivated, I'm like, let's do an action towards love. I want to love myself. What action can I do towards love to make me feel better, to make me want to encourage myself or motivate myself to do these things that I'm feeling discouraged to do? And I think that is there any specific thing that you would like to share with them that they can do or they can start to implement today that can help them shift from therapy into coaching?
Yeah, I think it depends where you're at. So I've worked with plenty of clients who are in both, who are still in therapy and then also working with me as a coach because they're in that kind of that end of that stage where they want to transition out. I'd say the first step, if anybody's in therapy and they're wanting to transition out, is to talk to your therapist because there is a time and place to stop. I remember when I stopped doing therapy and switched over to coaching, I talked to my therapist about it and said, hey, this is my plan. Here's why I want to do coaching. And I got their opinion and feedback. And a good therapist will value when you're ready to be done with therapy and ready to move on to that next chapter. They won't want you to stay where you're at. So getting their opinion and saying, am I ready for this? Or if now's not the right time, what, could we reevaluate in a month or 2 months or 3 months and reevaluate this to make sure we have a plan of what's next for me, or finding ways to integrate both. If you're, you need therapy, like the traumatic event just happened and you're still really in the thick of your healing piece there and needing to process what happened, talk through that, then I'm doing both. So you can still start to set goals, achieve goals, work with somebody on that future piece while also working through that past piece. Where too, I've also met people who work with, like I work with a therapist a coach who used to be a therapist. So she can support and hold space for me in the event that some of that more traumatic events come up, or working with somebody who has trauma-informed training in that space so that they can support you through that journey. Like I know I've gone through training to know more about trauma. Well, I'm not a therapist and don't have that background, my experience, and then the training I have had, I can at least help my clients. And I know where to draw the line and say, okay, that's something you should talk to your therapist about. So if somebody's wanting to get out of therapy, I'd say research and find a good coach. Most good coaches will at least do an introductory meet and greet or let you meet them and start to begin that coaching process. And you can always start out really slow. And then when you're done with therapy and have transitioned out, you can pick up the coaching.
Oh, I totally agree. But it's like, what I want to talk about is more about like therapy. A lot of people are very like what you said at the beginning. A lot of people are very scared or very mindful of therapy because a lot of therapy is talk therapy and it lack that connection, lack that empathy and stuff like that. And I know sometimes it does feel like that, but I do want to emphasize that therapy is important, especially if you experience something traumatic. Like we think that we could just work through it and just live our day to day and think that it eventually will go away. It will not. So definitely, if you're going through something traumatic, definitely seek out professional help. And then, like she said, it is some coaches that might have been a therapist and now is a coach. And you might can find somebody like that because they can be more intimate and they can be more on a personal level because they're not guided more by the regulations that a therapist is regulated by because they have a license. But it definitely, you need someone to help you navigate that traumatic experience. We don't not want to neglect that and just like, oh yeah, I could go straight into coaching. I'm do forward thinking without actually dealing with the past. We need to deal with the past first and then move forward thinking, like don't just neglect or just avoid that because you cannot find a therapist that you connect with, or you cannot find or you don't feel comfortable in the situation or talking about it and just think like, if I focus on my future, I'll be perfectly fine. No, address the problem. The problem will definitely keep coming up.
I agree. And most good coaches will say things along the lines of like, hey, this is actually something you would want to talk to a therapist about. So they'll encourage therapy. And I always say, healing or anything, and life is a journey in general, but healing especially is a journey. And I didn't get to doing coaching personally, like having my own coach. I didn't start that process in like 2012. My biggest traumatic event happened in 2011. I didn't start working with a coach until I think maybe 2018, 2019, like much later on, after I had done years and years and years of therapy, because there was so much trauma. that I needed to deal with and unpack. So I needed to unpack before I could kind of like pack up my future or define my future. The only thing I think I've learned in the process, while I don't diminish by any stretch therapy, is I wish I would have started coaching sooner. Like I thought therapy was the only answer, where I think therapy is a key fundamental pillar in anybody's healing. But I wish I would have known about coaching sooner so I could have started that progress sooner.
Totally agree. When it comes to your coaching, can you talk a little bit about the type of coaching that you do and how it helps, how you help your clients?
Yeah. So I am a health and wellness coach, and I'm also a certified emotional intelligence coach and trainer. But with the health and wellness coaching, it's focusing on the whole person. So I found for me that my healing really began when I focused on all of the aspects of my life. So how was I eating? How was my sleep? What was my exercise routine like? What was I doing to manage the things that were important for me, and how much energy was I putting into all of those, and what was blocking me? Was I happy with my career? So it wasn't just as much about the emotional mental side of it. It was truly kind of that holistic whole person piece. And that's what I do with really in my coaching with clients, is looking at their whole life and understanding where is their levels of satisfaction and where do they want to maybe up their satisfaction or set some goals and achieve some goals, and what do we need to do to get there, and who else do they need to bring into their kind of circle or support in order to help them get there. So sometimes I've worked with clients that the piece that they're the least happy about is like physical health. So we talk about a plan for how can we change that? What does that look like? But sometimes they'll also need additional support. I'm not a personal trainer, so if that's one of the areas they're focusing on, sometimes they'll also hire a personal trainer to support them in that journey, or they'll sign up for workout classes. They'll figure out a plan forward, but I'm helping them, figure out what they want that to be and get there. So the health and wellness coaching is really more focusing on that whole person, making sure that we feel balanced and satisfied with where we're at in life or where we want to be. And if we're missing, like if something doesn't feel complete, or we feel that there's levels or areas in our life that need a little bit more attention, we focus on those. And I have a background in human resources, which is kind of nice when clients need to talk about things like their careers or jobs or leadership qualities, because I have that leadership development background and HR background, so I can help them around things like their job and career as well, since I've done that work.
So it's pretty much like they experienced a traumatic experience. Now they come to me to put their life back together. So we deal with the situation. Now it's time to put our pieces back together so that we can enjoy the recovery of the traumatic experience that we had. Did I say that right? It's kind of like that, right?
In many ways, yeah. So I always tell like one thing that goes along with, so the name of my business is Awaken Empowerment, and like it's on my website, but it says transform your life. It's more of, that's my goal with helping clients, is regardless of what has happened to them, once that trauma, or even I've worked with plenty of clients that don't have trauma, but once they've hit a place where they're like, I am ready to reach my potential, or change my life and transform my life into who I want to be, that is where I feel like I really come in. And that is because I've done it myself. Like I went from this person who was broken, deflated, felt like the world was against me and really, really unhappy, to this person who feels fulfilled, has that level of balance that I always strive to have. And I know it's possible. I know it's possible to face a lot of adversity, a lot of difficulties, but still have that life that you've always desired.
Oh, that's awesome. Now, for those people that feel like they're not ready for therapy or not ready for coaching, is there anything that they can do to just start this process of like kind of just tapping into just exploring the transformation that they want in their life?
Yeah. I'd say podcasts like yours and there's so many wonderful podcasts out there to like listen to. So listen, I mean, there's plenty of podcasts that give, like we're giving tips now, but there's other podcasts that give tips and information. So you can really start at no cost by listening to podcasts. There's tons of books out there, different self-help and personal development books. So find what interests you. I know people will just read into what books they're interested in, or again, there's different types of, I always try to be careful because everybody has different beliefs, but there's people that you can just start by doing like meditations or journaling or walking exercises, or there's so many free resources out there. If you were to just journal or Google, like, what can I start doing to help myself? Like, what can I do to change? I think you would need to put in there, like, fill in the blank. So what can I do to change my physical health? What can I do to change my mental health? And then there's an abundance of free resources out there. But I think podcasts, that's kind of the place I started too. I found myself absorbed in podcasts, absorbed in books, absorbed in like free meditations, free journaling prompts, buying things on Amazon that were like gratitude journals and different things. Like I started very low cost myself too, and just found what worked for me. And it helped me kind of fine tune the type of coach I wanted to work with, the type of podcasts I did want to follow, as I would follow less podcasts over time and narrow my focus too on what I needed help with as I learned more and had more free resources.
I totally agree. I think if y'all are looking for not knowing where to start, I think the first place to start with is you. So it's just like exploring who you are and what you need, and just writing down and journaling about yourself and your experience, and seeing like, okay, I have problems with communication. I have problems with being in a space with other people. I have problems with my physical health. I have problems with these areas, and explore why you have those problems. Just when I'm in this space, I feel this and this and this, and why I feel this and this and that, and just do something that I call root chasing, and just like chase down to the root of why you think you're experiencing that challenge in your life. And then once you figure out the challenge that you're having, now then you find a support for the challenge.
Exactly.
I think that will be the best way to start if you're not in a place where you want to do therapy, or you're not in a place that you want to do coaching right now, and you do want to explore evolution in your life or a transformation in your life. It starts with you. So just really explore yourself, reflect on who you are, who you want to be, and acknowledge those blockages.
Yeah, I love that. And I've met, clients who are now clients, but we maybe talked for a year or two before they became a client. And I've had people that were like college students, a lot of them. They're like, listen, I can't afford this right now. What can I do? And I've often said, just journal. Like, journal at the start of every day and the end of the every day. Just what happened? What made you feel different ways? What came up for you when you felt upset or things were bothering you? What were those things that were bothering you? How did you feel based off of what you were eating? Write down what you're eating. How many hours did you sleep? Like, almost tracking habits too, and writing how different choices impacted you overall. So journal whatever you want, but I just gave them, again, like kind of all of those suggestions I said, and see over time. Because when I'm coaching clients, I always encourage them to journal, because you can look back and see the transformation and change that has occurred on how you journaled something on day 1 versus day 200. So even if you don't have the time or resources right now to work with a coach, you can do that work yourself and reflect back on your own journaling of, okay, here's how I'm feeling today, but 3 weeks from now, I'm not feeling that same way. What did I change? What did I do differently? How did that impact me? And that also shows to a commitment to growth. I often see when people do all of that work on their own before working with a coach, they're even better set up to work with a coach, because it shows that growth mindset. It shows that desire and want to change, and willingness to change without having that person holding you accountable.
That's true, because a lot of people go into a space of coaching or therapy because somebody else told them to do it, and they really don't have that motivation to do it. And they don't stick to it. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm not getting results. Why is this not working for me? Because it wasn't a commitment that you made for yourself. You did it because somebody else told you to do it. So if you're not willingly and going into a space of really wanting it for yourself, you will not perform, you will not do the things, you will not stay committed to the things that you're supposed to do to transform yourself, because it's not of your own will.
Yeah. And if you won't do free resources like listening to a podcast or journaling or meditation or reading, why are you going to do it when you're paying somebody to? So the coach can't change for you. Your therapist can't force you to change. I mean, it's exactly what you said of, you've got to do the work if you want to see change, regardless of you're working with somebody or not working with someone. And typically the people who are the most driven to change are the ones that will do the work on their own before they've even worked with a coach. They're like, hey, I've said to people too, like, what have you done for yourself before you're asking to work with a coach? Because how far have you gotten yourself on your own? What does that accountability look like? 'Cause I found some of the clients I've had that have had the most success with coaching is because they've done so much work and they're like, I'm stuck now. I need additional help. I've done everything I can on my own. And now I know that there's more, but I don't know what that is. So help me get there. And I'm feeling this block or I'm feeling stuck.
I totally agree, because a lot of people, we look externally instead of internally. So we think our solutions and answers is outside of us, where we have the answers. We just need, like you said, support to make those answers to finish, to continue forward, because we might know exactly what we want, but we just might not know how to get there. So we need that external support to get there. But we cannot ask for the external support to tell us what we need.
Yeah.
And think that they'll be able, okay, you tell me what I need and I'll go do it. And hopefully it'll work. And like, it doesn't work like that. You have to fully know exactly what you need, what type of support you need, so that the external people and things around you can support you in that effort of moving forward in your life. So definitely we have to do the work inside before we come and ask anything external for help or support.
I agree. Well, and I know, and at one point in my healing journey, I relied so much on the practitioners I was going to for everything. I felt that they had all the answers, and that so if something, like, say I was feeling anxious or something was coming up, I was like, oh, but I'm going to go do energy work next week or Reiki. So I'll be fine then. Like, I relied so much on the support system around me instead of saying, okay, what can I do in this moment and for me today to feel better? Can I go take a 10-minute walk? Can I do a breathing exercise? Can I journal? Like, early on in my healing journey, I was so reliant on everyone around me instead of saying, what can I do for myself now in this moment or today? And that I have found is what I've worked with people before who have had that same experience. They come to me and they'll text me in between sessions, hey, I need this, hey, I need that. And that's great. I'm there to show them support, but what are they going to do if I go on vacation for a week and I'm not available? Like, that doesn't help them in the moment when they need to solve a problem or handle a situation. As you said, we can't rely on others. The only person we can rely on is ourselves. But the beautiful thing with coaching is when you're at a point where you're like, there's a next layer of growth and I can see it. I can see that next level. I can see that next point of transformation, and I need somebody to help me get there. That's when coaching is pretty magical.
Mm-hmm. So what she pretty much saying is, find some self-soothing exercises. So when you're not in between sections, you don't have to reach out to your coach, or you don't have to reach out to your therapy. You just try to self-regulate yourself and self-soothe yourself in between those interactions with your support, so that you can learn how to support yourself the same way that your external support you.
Yeah. One of the best things I ever learned, and I still do it to this day, I think I'll be doing it for the rest of my life because of the amount of trauma I've been through, is how to regulate my nervous system. Because so much of what comes up for us is because of a dysregulated nervous system. And that's another free thing somebody could do. Google, how do I regulate my nervous system? You're not taking anything or physically doing anything. It's more physical movements, breathing, those items to get energy moving and get energy out to regulate yourselves. But that's a great place to start too.
I think that's a good one too, because I do that a lot, because I do a lot of breathing because of the amount of trauma that I've been through. I'm like, I can feel it. Like, oh, I can feel you can feel it in your body. Like, even though you heal, it's still there. Like, I tell people, everybody like, oh, I heard the quote before. I said that, people think that healing is getting over the trauma, but healing is actually letting the joy in. So what we're doing, even though you feel like you heal from the trauma, it's still hard to let joy, and it's still hard to let life happen to you and for you to enjoy life. So regulating your nervous system allows that to happen, allows you to restabilize your body to enjoy the moments that you are experiencing.
Mm-hmm. And be present, not so much focus. Because when we're not present, we're focused on the future or the past. And that's when emotions come up that aren't quote unquote good emotions. They're, the anxiety, stress, fear, those tend to be associated with thinking of the past or future.
Mm-hmm. I totally agree. Now, as we come to an end, is there any advice or any exercises that you would like to leave with the listeners before we end this episode?
I think advice would be don't give up on yourselves. Like you mentioned it, but healing is not something that just ends. I truly think it's a lifelong journey that transforms and changes and evolves with time. So for me, that was from therapy to coaching, personally working with therapists to then coaches, and working in a different space. And everybody has their own journey, and don't be afraid to try whatever you need to get you there. I know I felt like I was trying every healing modality and therapy modality or coaching modality under the sun because I needed to figure out what works for me. So truly for your listeners, like don't give up on yourselves and find what works for you, because what worked for your friend or the coach that worked for your friend or the therapist that worked for your friend may not be the right person for you, or you may not be there. You may not be in the same stage in your healing yet. You're at a different place in your healing. So keep trying whatever you need to try to find what works for you, because you'll find it. It just takes time. And I know it's frustrating, but don't give up on yourself.
Totally agree, because healing is not a straight path. It is a up and down, left, right, up and down. And everybody trauma and everybody experience is totally different. So what will work for her and what may not work for me, because even though I tell a lot of people I've been in domestic violence, a lot of people like, oh yeah, I was in a domestic violence relationship, so I can do it exactly what you did. I was like, no, my domestic violence relationship was way different than yours. I was in it for years, and then I watched my mother do it, where yours could have been just like a one-time situation, and it what requires from me to get over my situation does not require for you. So it might be easier for you to transition than it was for me, because mine was over my whole lifetime. You know what I'm saying? So definitely understand that even though they might be similar, everyone experiences completely different, and you have to do what worked for you. It might be a recommendation based on someone else's experience, and that's something that you may want to try, but doesn't make it's the end all be all, because y'all both had similar traumatic experiences.
Yeah. Well, they even say like people who are in car accidents together, they're they're in the exact same car accident. The healing looks different for each of them. So even if, like you're saying, the traumatic event is similar, we're all going to have a different reaction. We're all going to need different support. We're all going to need different resources. And we're all going to have a different healing journey or different transformation path. So be okay with that. And I too, I see people so much often say like, oh, I should be over this by now. I should be at the next stage. It's like, be patient with yourself and give yourself grace as you heal through what you need and transform through what you need, because there's no timeline. And when we pressure ourselves into being like, oh, I need to be at this next stage, it's like your body's not ready for that yet, or your mind's not there yet. And just give yourself time to get there. It'll happen, but you have to keep doing the work.
Yeah. And be compassionate with yourself, and don't rush yourself, and don't guilt yourself like, oh my God, I should be here. No, the more guilt and more shame that you put on yourself is what's prolonging the progression of healing. Allow your healing to let it be and let it progress on its own time, in its own way. And then you'll be able to move to the levels that you think you should be at as the time progresses. I promise you, don't rush it. And you want to be at the top of the mountain. The top of the mountain is just not as what you think it is. Everybody think the top of the mountain is just like, oh, it's a big party up there. No, it's more work. So just be mindful of that. Like we said before, healing is an ongoing process. It's always work. It's always improving. It just becomes easier as we get closer to the top of the mountain. Those things that was hard at the bottom, we're now at the top, where we actually control our breathing because the air is thinner up there. So we know how to breathe better, to make sure we have that oxygen level. We make sure we can keep going and keep living. So it's just a little different. We just learned a couple things while we was climbing the mountain that could sustain our life a lot better.
Absolutely.
All right. Now that we ended, can you please tell the listeners where they can find you, and again, a little bit more about your coaching business and that's it. Yeah, your coaching business and your social media and everything, so they can get in contact with you if they're looking to become a client.
Absolutely. So my website is Awaken Empowerment. So hopefully we can link in the show notes, because I know it's a little long, but it's awakenempowerment.com. And on there is my blog, which goes into a little bit about my story that we've talked about. And I'm going to be posting some more blog posts this year, as well as what type of work I do. So working with me, I do the one-on-one coaching if somebody wants to work with me one-on-one individually. And that's that health and wellness coaching, looking at the whole person and who do they want to become? What do they want to be? How do they want to transform their life? I also do group facilitation and public speaking. And I do I mentioned before, emotional intelligence assessments. I typically do those in coaching, but I'll also do those in group facilitation or public speaking. And for those group facilitation and public speaking, I do topics around resilience and empowerment and how we can take health and wellness into our personal and professional lives more. So looking at whether that's a workplace or any group that wants to have a group conversation around it, I do that as well. So you can get in contact with me on my website there. I am not a social media person. I know I'm the worst millennial ever, so I don't have social media links. So my website is the best way to reach me and would love to connect with anybody who's interested in learning more.
Well, thank you so much for being a guest here today. And I am so thankful for this conversation.
Thank you.
Well, that's it for today's episode of a Sisters Love podcast. But before we end, I want to invite you to our new support group. This group is exclusively for podcast listeners. This is the perfect place for women to come together, share experiences, ask questions, and get access to exclusive resources. You'll also get to meet some of those amazing guests in this group. Also, this is a judge-free zone, okay? You don't have to worry about feeling unheard or alone. To join this group, all you have to do is sign up for a mailing list. And once you do that, you will be granted access to the support group. All you have to do is find the link below and click it. So bye-bye until next time. Signing out, your sister through love.